Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today on a Monday. We are presented by Walmart. I'm Dave Revson. We'll talk about the men's NCAA tournament, about Penn State's amazing run to the Frozen Four, catch up on the whole weekend around the Big Ten. But we do start with the UCLA women making some history. Our big story, the Bruins into the NCAA Final Four for the first time ever. They topped LSU 72-65 yesterday to wrap up a spot in Tampa next weekend. It's the third straight year the Big Ten has had at least one team in the Final Four, longest streak in 24 years. UCLA, the #1 overall seed in the tourney, and they are 2 wins away from a national title. It was their 34th victory of the year, tying for the most ever for any Big Ten team in the NCAA era. That dates back to the early 80s. It is important to note UCLA did win a national title back in the late 70s. That was the AIAW era. All of the other Big Ten teams to hit 34 wins in a season also made the Final Four. Alyssa Charleston-Smith got the post-game reaction from the jubilant Bruins.
Lauren, when you came to UCLA, I know this was the goal, but to actually get to the first Final Four in UCLA history, what does it mean to you?
Oh my God, it means so much. I'm just so proud of this team and this program and these coaches. I mean, they put together a really good scout. They prepared us in the best way possible. They continue to hold us to the highest standard, and I just really appreciate all the work that's been put into these games. I mean, I'm just so proud. I'm so proud.
What did it feel like when Gabriella Jaquez hit that three to put you up 7 with 1:30 to go?
Yeah, I mean, I was screaming at her. I watched the ball because it ended up going so high, and I was like, no way, this is going in. And when it dropped, I was just like pure joy, just so happy. And that's the work that she puts in. I mean, she's ready for that shot.
Yeah, I'm just ready shooter. I mean, Lauren draws so much attention, and we have to shoot those shots, you know, and then she's going to get good position to rebound, and so I just be confident in myself. You know, I know that's the right shot to take. I practice it all the time, and I did shoot it really high because I was getting a long closeout, but yeah, I was like, just so proud of myself for just being confident and putting the work in. And you have to understand basketball is a game of runs, and they're good players. They're a good team. That's why they're here, and we understand that. But just making adjustments, how can we stop them? And you know, we went on runs too, and so it's just understanding that not to get too worried and stay confident because we know what we can do. And I mean, again, you saw it today.
Your coach said you expected to be here. You guys have a business work-like mentality. What does it actually mean to get here for the first time in UCLA women's basketball history?
It means everything. That's why I came to UCLA. That's why everyone came to UCLA, because we want to do something UCLA women's basketball has never done before, and we're on that path right now. And we understand that it doesn't stop here. We have more basketball to play, and we've had it in our mind that we're going to Tampa, and you know, so no, we're not surprised. You know, we've been planning like this the whole season, and we've been ready since our loss a year ago exactly today.
To do it with this group and really to have our alumni here, it's really about stringing together the string for all the people that poured into making this thing happen. It takes a village to build a program, just like it takes a village to raise a child, and it's all about the people we get to share it with.
And to see Lauren Betts miss the entire second quarter and so many people step up like Tamia Gardner and Gabriella Jaquez, what did it mean to see that versatility?
Well, I mean, that's what we've been saying all year, is that we have a higher margin for error because of our depth. If we could maintain a sense of selflessness, if the we over me on the back of our shirts can not just be on the shirts, but affect our behaviors, we were going to be just fine. And, you know, we say sometimes you, sometimes me, but always us. And today we proved that it really is always about us.
Shimmy Miller is with me to talk through UCLA heading to the women's Final Four, and they got there, Shimmy, against a team that knocked them out a year ago in LSU. What stood out to you about the Bruins win?
Well, they're a completely different team than they were last year, Dave. It's not even comparable. I mean, the only thing that's the same are what's on the front of their jerseys. UCLA came into this tournament with just so much more confidence. And I will go back to the Big Ten championship game where they were down double digits at halftime, and they were able to find a way to claw back, fight back. It was almost kind of the coming out party of Lauren Betts, her aggressiveness that night. There was no way she was going to let her team lose, and they've carried that type of momentum and confidence and even edge. I feel like they have an edge to them that UCLA didn't have before into the tournament. I mean, it hasn't been easy for them by any means. I mean, you just look as recently as the Richmond game. It was a very close game. It was tied at halftime. and then what they were able to do to Richmond in the second half. So I just feel like UCLA right now, they are playing with on a different level of confidence than they had a year ago.
I think one of the things that's interesting, Corey Close said it this week, she said, hey, this does not need to be a scientific formula. This is an art project. It will just come together, and you kind of trust the process here and don't necessarily worry about it needing to be perfect. And I thought that was really emblematic of the way they played against LSU, because let's be honest. I mean, they obviously shot well from the three, but it didn't go great. Lauren Betts had the foul trouble early on, which certainly isn't something that you would script. But at the end, they made the plays they had to make. And that, to your point, I think is the mark of a really good team that believes in itself.
When you go into the portal the way Corey Close did, and you get a few pieces, like, for example, Tamia Gardner, right? Tamia Gardner was a standout at Oregon State, a very highly coveted player out of the portal, but she's really been relegated to being a role player at UCLA. Same with Janiah Barker. Janiah Barker was a 2-year starter at Texas A&M. She was the Big Ten Sixth Player of the Year, but she's been a role player at UCLA. But as a coach, you have those pieces in your back pocket, those players that are capable of stepping up and making plays, should the need be there. And last night against LSU, the need was there. The script is very simple. We have the best post player in the country, so we're going to play through her. Lauren Betts was dominant. She has been absolutely dominant in this tournament. I mean, she throttled Ole Miss, right? I mean, she was 15 of 16 from the field. Well, she starts off aggressive again against LSU, but then she gets in foul trouble. She has to sit the entire second quarter. So now what do? Well, you remember we went into the portal and we got a really good shooter in Tamia Gardner, someone who didn't even take a shot against Ole Miss because she didn't have to. And then she comes out and bangs 5 threes. So when you're Corey Close, that gives you a great deal of confidence that our superstars, Kiki Rice, Lauren Betts, Jaquez, that they don't necessarily have to be at their best in order for us to still have a chance to win a game.
Really a great story. 7th time they've been to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament under Corey Close. They get their breakthrough. They are headed to the Final Four. And so now they await the winner of USC against UConn. That game is tonight. The Trojans are the #1 seed. The Huskies are the 2nd seed. Obviously, that was all before the injury to Juju Watkins. They face a UConn team, USC does, that is clicking on all cylinders, particularly their star, Paige Bueckers, had 40 in the Sweet 16 win over Oklahoma. And the obvious question here, at least initially, as you look at this matchup here, Shimmy, is how do you stop Paige Bueckers?
Well, congratulations, you made it to the Final Four. Now, as your prize, you get to play potentially the best player left in the tournament in Paige Bueckers. I mean, she's projected to be the #1 draft pick in the WNBA. Here, the reality is that Paige Bueckers, that was the game of her life, that 40-point game. This is the type of performance that her coach, Gino Auriemma, has been begging for her. She's almost kind of like a reluctant superstar. Like, even at halftime of their game the other night, he was complaining to Holly Rowe that she's not shooting. Like, I wish she would shoot. I don't know why she doesn't shoot. And then she comes out in the second half and then, she finishes the game with 40. But Juju Watkins is not walking through that door. And Lindsay Gottlieb is too good of a coach to still be lamenting that fact. She has moved on. Yeah. And it certainly helps when you have Kiki Iriafen and you have a backcourt. Now, it's not just any freshman backcourt that USC has. They were the #1 ranked recruiting class in the country. They've combined for 86 points in the last 2 games, so they have really stepped up. USC has a chance to beat UConn if they're able to do 2 things. One, if that freshman backcourt continues to play at a high level, which also means they've got to take care of the ball because UConn also defends at a really high rate. And the second thing is if USC can guard Paige Bueckers. Right. And so it's a tall task, Dave, but it's not improbable.
It sounds like Kennedy Smith will get the initial assignment against Bueckers, which is tough for a freshman. She has been the defensive stopper this year, as we know, for USC. You mentioned Iriafen. She didn't play great against Kansas State, which was crazy because she was coming off just a fabulous game against Mississippi State where she scored nearly 40 points, 36, had 9 rebounds, was just tremendous. She said after that K-State game, hey, my confidence isn't shaken, but they're going to need her to be Mississippi State Kiki Iriafen, not the one that we saw against K-State. So how do you get her to play at her best against the Huskies?
I was actually really surprised that Lindsay Gottlieb didn't go to her early. Like, I thought that they would actually run some specific actions for Kiki early, but they didn't. And then I found that Kiki, she didn't like the physicality of Ayoka Lee. Those two kind of neutralize each other, and Ayoka Lee is the All-American post player for Kansas State. They both really neutralized one another, and so Kiki was kind of relegated to settling for outside jumpers. She can't do that against Connecticut. She's going to have to be dominant. Her primary defender is going to be a freshman. Now, granted, it's the #1 freshman in the country, and Sarah Strong, but she's going to have to exert her will against this freshman and do it early to get herself going.
So the winner there, as we said, goes on to play UCLA in the Final Four. We've seen USC versus UCLA 3 times, but we saw it with Juju Watkins, so it's a little bit different. Obviously, we're USC to be fortunate enough to get through. UCLA, Connecticut's a possible matchup too. How do you see UCLA matching up with those two, Shimmy?
I would love it to be another USC-UCLA matchup like part 4. I would love that, and I think UCLA would love that too, because obviously that's the matchup they're most comfortable with. Juju has actually torched UCLA 3 times this season, even in the loss. No Juju, so that game would give UCLA more confidence. The UConn game, which seems probably more likely the UCLA matchup, UCLA-UConn matchup, it's going to be a battle of the bigs. It's going to be, the freshman Strong versus the All-American Lauren Betts, and I love it. It's going to be in the backcourt. You're going to see Kiki Rice matched up against Paige Beckers or AZ Fudd, and I love it. It's just going to be a lot of star power and a lot of defense. If those two teams play each other, expect a lower scoring game and a lot of defense.
Well, we will certainly hope it's the first part of that matchup, and it's USC against UCLA. The UCLA players were asked about it. I thought they evaded the question well, essentially said, hey, no comment on whether we want to see USC again. Very well coached, not just on the court, but off the court as well. Shimmy Miller, great stuff. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the game tonight.
All right, thanks, Dave.
Walk us back to the first day of practice in the fall and the process that it has taken to be at this moment in the Elite Eight with this team. What can you assess from the process of that journey?
Boy, you use a word that not many people use anymore. There is a process, there is a journey, and it's for everybody. Everybody has a process and a journey, but I think people think it just jumps ahead. It doesn't. And the process was unbelievable because I got to go there with them. We really didn't have anybody that had that much experience other than Jaden. The other 2 seniors were guys that just came in. So there was nobody here that had that much experience. And so I got to share it with them, learn it with them, hopefully teach them a little bit with them. But if there was ever a time we were all in it together, this was the year. Everybody was in it together. And that's the only way we survived what we did. And again, to win the Big Ten, people can say what they want, but Big Ten's awfully good too. And, I was pulling for Matt the other night, and, it was, in Michigan and Maryland, we represented pretty well in our league, but we didn't get anybody to the Final Four, and that disappoints me. But at the same time, I feel good about the league we're in. I feel good about the program I'm in. And I think there's a lot more winning to be done in the next couple of years.
Jaden, what was the most disruptive defensive scheme that you faced against Auburn, and how did that disrupt your flow of offense?
Really just their switching, hard denies, making every catch tough, and then getting to the paint, they would just rally to the ball. I feel like, they made it tough for us in the first half with that.
If you go all the way back to the fall in November when you guys were preparing to compete, could you have imagined the journey that this team has been on this year?
I mean, it's Sting right now for sure, but just this group of guys is special. I feel like a lot of people didn't think we were going to do what we did, and I'm grateful for that and just how we fought all season.
What did you learn most about the culture at Michigan State during your career?
I would say resiliency. I mean, just with my career, it's been a lot of ups and downs, but I feel like I stayed true to the program and to what I believed in, and I just tried to give them my all every time.
I feel like everybody came into the season ready to work. There was a lot of people saying we weren't going to be good. We're going to be one of the worst Michigan State teams there's been. So we kind of took that to heart going into the fall, and people kept saying they don't know if we're good, they don't know if we're going to be able to do something. Won the Big Ten, so I was super proud of that. Got to the Elite Eight, which hasn't been done since 2019. So a lot of people are going to try to discredit us, but I'm super proud of how we fought this season and what we've done.
What have you learned most about yourself through that process?
Kind of just, the improvement that I can do. I feel like a lot of it I credit to my coaches because, they worked with me. They stayed by my side. Even in games where I felt like I didn't do good, they stayed by my side. And I got to credit my teammates, coming off after a couple of games, in LA, I felt like I wasn't at my best. I told them I was going to be better. For my teammates, said the same thing in New Mexico. So I credit all these guys for giving me a lot of trust.
And speaking of that trust, moving forward with your career, in terms of next year, the culture that's been created, an Elite Eight run, how are you going to carry that forward and gain momentum to start the season next year?
Definitely. I mean, we got to have a lot of fight and, just going to sit in the back of everybody's head that's returning. So we know we got to come back next year and, really put it all together.
Jordan Taylor is here now to talk a little bit about Michigan State, some of the other Big Ten teams from this weekend. And you and I had this conversation yesterday on the Big Show. And I do think you kind of, if you're talking about the game yesterday and why they lost, I mean, you just have to make shots. And sometimes basketball is as simple as a make and miss game. And, man, they just missed too many.
Yeah, they missed too many, but you always go back to Michigan State. That's been a thing with them all year long, and they found ways to win games. I think yesterday Auburn was just an impossible matchup for them. That's been their Achilles heel defensively all year, is guarding the big man. Vlad Golden averaged 25 against him. Nick Martinelli had 27. The bigs from New Mexico shot 75%. TKR had 24 against him. And then Janai Broom's the best player in the country at that position. And he set the tone early. They went inside to him. He went left hook, right hook, and he was just tough to stop. But you got to give a credit to Jackson Kohler. He kind of embodies what that MSU team was about. He was getting beat up, he was getting scored on, but he was coming right back at Janai Broom, and he's a dog, and Michigan State really put up a fight this year.
They did. I think the unfortunate part, really, of the entire NCAA tournament is it just didn't feel like Michigan State played its A game in any of these NCAA tourney games, and I do feel like their A game, maybe I see things through Big Ten colored glasses. I've probably been accused of that before, and how can you help but to? I mean, we've been covering this league as closely as we have for me for 18 years. But I looked at them and I said, that's a Final Four quality team if they play their best. And it just didn't seem like in this tournament as a whole, but specifically yesterday, they didn't play their best.
Yeah, and what teams did really well against them was kind of out Michigan State at times. They hit the glass, specifically Auburn. They hit the glass every single time the ball went up. Janai Broom, those guys were on Michigan State's back. And what that did to them, it bogged down that break, right? And when we've seen Michigan State be really good offensively, when they can get out in transition, Trey Holloman, Jace Richardson, all those guards can find space because when they get in the half court, the spacing wasn't always great because of the inability to shoot the ball. Jackson Kohler, again, did a great job at expanding his game throughout the year to help with that. But when you can't get out in the fast break, 4 fast break points yesterday, it was just going to be tough for them to get right.
They had 3 fast break points in the previous game. So to your point, they just couldn't get in that flow. They haven't shot the 3 well all year. I thought what was different yesterday was they shot the 2 as poorly as they did. 37%, they missed so many layups, and Tom was even talking about it in the press conference afterwards, just kind of saying, man, if you can't make layups, if you can't make the easiest shots in the game, you're not going to win, particularly not against a team like Auburn. I do think it's important for it not to overshadow what a great year this was for Michigan State. I know, and Tom said this week, if you've won the national championship, years are only a success if you win it. I think if you gave them truth serum, though, with this year, a team that was picked 5th in the Big Ten, there was 1 media member in the preseason who picked them to win the league. They end up going 17-3 in the Big Ten. They had a larger average margin of victory in conference play this year than Purdue did last year. And we think about how dominant Purdue was. I think you can't look at this year as anything but a significant success for Michigan State.
Huge success. Well, first of all, whoever that media member was, get that guy a raise, right? Yeah, that's a heck of a call.
Were it me, I'd be raising my hand.
Right, absolutely, right? But no, I wrote down on my sheet, proud. If I was a Michigan State fan, you talked about the Big Ten rose-colored glasses. Like as a Big Ten alum, this team was fun to watch. You could feel the intensity and the passion that they have for the game come through on the TV screen. And then we talked about yesterday at the Big Ten tournament. You saw it when they played it. They play hard. They play together. That's a team that, when you get a part of those teams and they're rare because the synergies just come together for whatever reason. You heard Jace talk about we got picked to be one of the worst Michigan State teams. They took that to heart. You got a freshman in Jace, a guy in Fears who's coming back from, his ups and downs and adversity and playing well. But then you got leaders like Trey Holloman and Jaden Akins who gladly, for lack of a better term, not step aside, but they allowed them to grow as freshmen, and they took somewhat of a lesser role than maybe they thought they would have going into the season. And when you get that kind of chemistry, it's just fun, it's special, and you just got to tip your hat to Coach Izzo and then the guys for executing all year long.
This really was, in a lot of ways, a Tom Izzo team in the mold of his best teams for a lot of the reasons you're talking about. They played so hard, they felt very connected, they played really good defense. They rebounded well. They did all of those things. I think in the end, it just comes down to, in this day and age in particular, if you're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in a power conference, which the numbers tell us they were, it's hard to win. It can be done, but it's hard.
It's hard to win because everybody's big, everybody's physical now. Big Ten obviously has had that stigma of being the black and blue and beating teams up. Now we're playing a little bit more in transition. And, again, Auburn out Michigan State. So you have to find ways to create space. But, again, can't take away. They won their last 7 games of the conference, 5 of which against the top 7 teams in the conference. That was one of the great runs. We sat in here.
8 straight quad one wins.
I sat here. I said, ain't no way they're going to win these games and win the Big Ten. And they did it. But, yeah, I think next year going into, they got a bunch of guys returning. How can they find some three-point shooting? And hopefully, I know everybody in East Lansing got their rosaries praying Jace Richardson maybe comes back. But
right, yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, he can come back. They have a lot that could come back for next year. I mean, certainly if Jace Richardson comes back, that changes the outlook dramatically. I mean, you look at the players that come back, obviously Jaden Akins is gone, but I mean, the rest of it, man, that's the bulk of that team, the nucleus of that team. So we will see again in this day and age. I think it's almost a fool's errand sometimes to look at who could come back because whether or not they will come back is the question. And then for Tom Izzo, do you supplement it a little bit with the portal, which he's shown just a slight increase in an inclination to do here in the last year or so. Well, up next, we're going to focus in on the Boilers and the Wolverines. Purdue dropping a heartbreaker, while Michigan fell to the same Auburn team that took down the Spartans. Take a deep dive into both straight ahead. This is a game that was there for the taking. They really played well, Purdue did, particularly defensively until the final play. What did you take from the game against Houston?
Well, first of all, Houston has that suffocating defense. They're one of those teams that you enjoy watching play defense. Just like everybody you know me, I like buckets. Pass it to the basket, but the way they're in sync and rotation on a string is beautiful. So you got to tip your hat to Purdue, P.J. Thompson. At the beginning of that second half, Houston kind of put it on them, but the ball in the body was moving. And the game plan to scheme Braden Smith open in that game, but all year long was tremendous. It just didn't go in, but Purdue stayed the course. They hung in there. And then on the other side of the ball, you got to give it to Terry Johnson and the defensive coordinating. They really, really hung in there with Houston. When they went down 9-10, they really bunkered down, and they got stops.
I'm kind of the belief that by the time we get to the NCAA tournament, a team is who they are. We have just so much evidence over the course of the year. But Purdue would be a counter to that with the way they defended in the NCAA tournament. We talked a lot about it. They had the worst two-point defense by field goal percentage in all of the power conferences, inside the arc this year. And then again in the NCAA tournament, they gave up 46% from two-point range in those 3 games. I mean, they put themselves in a position defensively to win games. And then I think the stat with Braden Smith in this Houston game, they had 11 field goals in the second half. He assisted on every one of them.
Yeah, 11 assists in the second half, 15 in the game. We could talk about Braden Smith all day. In the season
wild.
he had, the comparables. We talked about the Magic Johnson was incredible. But to your point of kind of a leopard changing its spots, I was, you heard Matt Painter talk about after Christmas. I was fortunate enough to have that game against Minnesota January 2nd, and they got beat up by Auburn. And you could see them start to adjust. Their defense was good in spurts. Braden Smith talked about then, but you also started to see the offense change. They took the ball out of Braden Smith's hands more in terms of bringing it up the court and allowed him to play off the ball to catch the ball closer to the basket. So that's really a credit to Coach Painter for allowing his assistants to kind of grow, and P.J. Thompson, Terry Johnson to do their thing. Well, sometimes he gets to talk about the Cubs and then goes in there and does his thing. He's an incredible coach, fun to talk to. But yeah, it was great to see them morph throughout the year, even through their downs.
I thought it was really interesting, too, that they had to be a different team than they expected to be.
Yeah.
You knew you were going to lose Zach Edey, but to lose Daniel Jacobson as quickly as they did, and when we talk about why the rim protection maybe wasn't at the level that you would expect 100%. It to be, the injury to Daniel Jacobson was a huge part of that. And if you think about next year, he can come back. I mean, really, again, not dissimilar from Michigan State. You're talking about a team, and look at it here. Like, this is essentially the team. I mean, this is the nucleus of Purdue. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn evolved into one of the best players in the league. I thought the way that Cam Heide played in the NCAA tournament gives you great hope for the future. So if that whole group comes back, I mean, Purdue's probably considered the favorite. They were considered the favorite going into this year, if you'll recall, and maybe fell a little bit short of that. But I think you would have to consider them. Again, you don't know what everyone else is going to do in the portal, but they'd be right up there.
100%. And first of all, let's pay homage to Caleb first, man. He did a phenomenal job stepping in, providing physicality. Not a rim protector, but that defensive presence that you lost when Daniel Jacobson went out. And then Cam Heide, to your point, that's the guy that they were looking for all year that we saw the last couple games of the tournament. So that's going to build great confidence for him going into the year. We know Matt Painter does a great job at retaining guys. Obviously, the elephant in the room is Braden Smith is, the LeBron James of college basketball right now, but you just hope that you get to see him in a Boilermaker jersey. And, yeah, if they get everybody back and you have that continuity, and TKR, to me, he's got to become a better playmaker. He was a great decision maker out of pick and roll with Braden Smith, but now when he gets doubled, if he becomes that playmaker, that's what kind of held them up at times. Houston did a great job at blitzing Braden Smith, primary ball handler, the only one. But when TKR becomes that playmaker as well, Purdue's going to be a monster, and then you add in the rim protection like you mentioned.
He took a massive jump. Kaufman-Renn this year was the most improved scorer in the Big Ten. So lots to look forward to for Purdue. That's the story with the Boilermakers.
Coach, a really great run this season, 27 wins as compared to 8 last year. What do you want your team from this season to remember about how they won those games?
Well, I just want this group to remember how they did it together. We had different guys step up every night. We improved so much as a group, and they really developed strong, lifelong, meaningful relationships, and ultimately that's a big goal as well. And I think we came close to maxing out as a group.
And with that being said, you maxed out in the Big Ten tournament, and you cut nets there. Those lifelong memories that were created in that moment, I know it's hard to encapsulate what it is, just moments after that game you just played against Auburn, but what do you want to cement in your players because of how they won that championship?
I want them to understand that they've left a legacy at the University of Michigan, and they'll always come back to campus and be able to bring their kids and grandkids and point at the banner that they hung. This is ultimately about their experience and their growth and preparing them for life. And, I'm very, very fortunate to be along for the ride, and our staff is grateful for our guys letting us coach them, letting us be a part of this journey, and trusting us to come and be a part of Michigan basketball.
You all fought hard to the end. What was the ultimate backbreaker for you in this Sweet 16 game?
Probably turnovers has been our kryptonite for a whole year. We couldn't basketball is a game of runs, and sometimes you have to be able to stop the runs, and they went on a huge run that we couldn't stop.
And even with the score not being what you wanted it to be, what were the positive things that you could take out of being a part of this Michigan program?
That's all I wanted, playing for that kind of school, having that kind of relationship that we've built with this team. I love everybody on this team. There's no better team, and I would not like to finish any other way. I love Michigan, and that's the best thing I can say.
And your parents had a chance to come and see you play this year. There's so many memories that you made with them present. How special will you tuck that away in your heart moving forward?
It's been amazing. I wanted to show them what is college basketball is about, and I want to show them that, because it's impossible to explain it. I can explain them, describe everything in the best ways possible, but it's impossible to show it. And I have talked to them after that fact, and they said it was the best 20 days in their life, and that's all I can dream about.
Really cool story there with Vlad Golden. He talked about the turnovers, and that was their undoing. This year when they played poorly, it was often tied to turnovers. It's interesting because in this game, the turnover numbers were equal, but Michigan's were far more damaging. Auburn was plus 10 in points off turnovers, and as Vlad said, it kind of came down to that run, and Michigan's mistakes were a huge part of it.
Yeah, and part of those mistakes were not getting the ball where it needed to go at the time when it needed to be there. And we talked about last week in the Big Ten tournament, in the first round of the NCAA tournament, one of the best plays Trey Donaldson made against Colorado, in their second round game, was just getting the ball to Vlad Golden in the post to stop a run. Yesterday on that 20-2 run, Vlad Golden didn't touch the ball until they were up 9, and they didn't touch it again until they were down 9. Right. So that was a huge problem. He was their rock. He was their steadying force when things were going wrong. And yes, they had 15 turnovers, but I think it was more about they got comfortable, and that kind of sums up Michigan's season. They're really good, but then they just had the inconsistencies. Up 48-39, you go under on a screen with Pettiford. He knocks down a 3, an unforced turnover on just a straight pass, lazy chase to the corner, another 3, that 9-point lead goes to 3, and against a team like Auburn, you do that, it's a wrap.
And they didn't shoot it well either, and maybe we have to give some credit here to Auburn's defense, because we've talked about them twice here in both of the games. We said, if the Big Ten team just would have shot it better. Right. Well, there might be a reason. Again, hat tip to Bruce Pearl and his team. They are really good. So that's the story of the game against Auburn. But let's talk about the season. I thought Christy, the way she framed it was absolutely the story. I mean, you're talking about someone inheriting a program that lost 24 games and made the Sweet 16 the next year. And just to put that in perspective, it's never been done. There's never been a team that's lost that many games. And since the Sweet 16 became the Sweet 16, which was the mid-1970s, we've never had a team go from 24 or more losses to the Sweet 16. So this is uncharted waters here for Michigan, and it really speaks to how good Dusty May is and where this program can go now under his leadership. Yeah,
I've belabored the point all year long that Michigan was the first game I got to do on the network, and I got to sit with Dusty May for 5 minutes, and he just has a presence about him that he's a leader. He knows how to raise men, but also basketball players, and he did a phenomenal job doing that all year long. And I think, especially bringing in 11 new guys, to be able to do that in such a short amount of time, to me it explains some of the inconsistencies, but then you also tip your hat. I think everybody says, hey, externally, they're picked to finish 9th, right? I look at it, and if I'm internally in that locker room, as almost a season, it's not a disappointment, but you had more to do, and I think that's something to kind of look forward to going into next year. They had so much talent, and we kind of docked them for their record last year. But they were close. They were a couple games away from winning a Big Ten championship, falling apart late. I think they were right there against Auburn, going to the Elite Eight, and obviously they won the Big Ten championship.
They created so many matchup problems for people, and that is going to be part of the issue is, can you still do that going forward? Golden is obviously gone. Yeah. There will be a lot of speculation about Danny Wolf. You look at who could come back. Again, Wolf could come back. He's being projected as a first-round pick, and so that not dissimilar from what we were talking about with Jace Richardson. You have a decision to make, and it's different. It's different than when you played. I don't mean to rub it in. No. But, right, the calculus is different. And so you could look at it and say, well, I can make some good money, and I want to be a part of this, and that's not an irrational decision for someone to make. But when you're Jace Richardson, Danny Wolf, you're being projected as first-round picks. it's an interesting decision.
Yeah, it's a really tough decision. To your point, it's a harder decision. I had an opportunity when I was after my junior year to test the waters and go, and I chose not to. And I wasn't getting any money just because I had a love for Wisconsin. I wanted to come back. I wanted to go to a Final Four.
Those were simpler times, weren't they?
Yeah, we'll talk about my decision making later, but that's okay. No, with these guys, 100%. If you can go back and build on what you just did, and obviously, with the portal and the way things are, is a tough decision. I will say the one thing that is not dissimilar with the calculus is if you're hot, sometimes you got to go, and that's, and it's a great opportunity for Danny Wolf and Jace Richardson. They want to go live out their dreams, but as Big Ten fans, we want to see him back.
It would be amazing. I mean, again, one of the things that I think we need to talk about as an elephant in the room, I know it gets talked about nationally, is Big Ten hasn't won a national championship now, right? We're a quarter of a century here. If some of these players come back, you could see the potential there for the Big Ten ending that drought next year. We'll see. But I mean, like some of those rosters we put up there, those are Final Four / national championship type rosters. Again, if everyone comes back and if you supplement it with some guys in the portal.
100%. And I will say the one thing in this transfer portal with everybody leaving and you don't have guys there for 4 years, the one thing that cements you at a school, like Dusty May said, is championships. When you can go hang a banner, if you're there for 1 year, 6 months, that's something that you remember forever. The fans remember forever. So, and with those rosters, and it
is interesting that the schools we're talking about, Michigan would be an exception just because of the way that they had to be built, because of how depleted the roster was. But these are schools here that have had a lot of continuity and have built their program 100% internally. So we'll see if it continues next year. Up next, the Big Ten is headed to the Frozen Four, and the team that made it is quite a story. How Penn State overcame a slow start to make history. Stick around. It is time to go around the Big Ten, and what a story Penn State hockey's been. They beat UConn in overtime yesterday to advance to their first ever Frozen Four. Keep in mind, this is a team that lost its first 8 games in conference play, managed to sneak into the NCAA tourney as a 4 seed, then beat top-seeded Maine and the second-seeded Huskies. They've won 15 games since January 1st, 8 of them by 1 goal. And so now they're bound for St. Louis in the Frozen Four. They take on Boston University on April the 10th. Western Michigan, Denver, the other semifinal. Guy Gadowski's team 2 wins away from becoming the Big Ten's first national champion in 18 years.
It's a lot of work went into this one from a lot of years back. The alumni that did so well, that inspired the Pagula family and Mr. Pagula to give the gift that they did. And then obviously the administration at that time worked so hard to get this together. It took a lot of work. It was fun, but it was a lot of work from a lot of great people. And I think for me it means, like, I really think about the guys that joined this program first when everybody said we're going to get killed. Why go? You're going to lose for years and years and years. And it was those guys that really had faith that Penn State was going to be what you see now at Google Ice Arena, what you saw here at UPL Center and in Allentown. I mean, the support we get is just off the charts. So that's what I was thinking.
Baseball this weekend. How about Nebraska? Hasn't been a great start to the year. They're well under 500, 2-7 in the Big Ten. But they took 2 of 3 over the last few days from Oregon State, a Beavers team that was ranked 8th nationally. Nebraska captured the rubber game yesterday, tallying a season-high 16 runs in a 9-run victory. The dramatic conclusion of our show next, focusing in on the conclusion of Kevin Willard's brief stay in College Park. What's next for the Terps? Straight ahead. And perhaps the least surprising news of the weekend, Maryland announced yesterday the men's basketball coach Kevin Willard's leaving for Villanova. He spent 3 years with the Terps, leading them to 2 NCAA tourneys, made the Sweet 16 this year. Thursday's loss to Florida largely overshadowed by Willard's very public discussions regarding his future. He returns to the Big East, where he spent 12 seasons as the head coach at Seton Hall. Look, I would just say this. Do whatever you want professionally, right? You have a contract, and so, if you want to leave. I think it's a shame. I think Maryland is a great program. This is the most recent program in the Big Ten to win a national championship. They obviously didn't do it as a member of the Big Ten. And I think the public discussions of his future, unfortunately, really sucked the joy out of this Sweet 16 run for a lot of Maryland fans. And I think that's a shame. I understand wanting to take a different job, but the way that it was handled here in the last couple of weeks is really too bad.
Yeah, I think you got to go into that weekend, especially coming off the big shot by Derek Queen, the emotional win over Colorado State, and you got a chance to go to a Final Four with a top 5 pick, and guys like Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, Julian Reese, his last go around. So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the way that he went about that, and I think it was a missed opportunity. Hats off to Florida, a really good team, but I think they could have done that a little differently.
I look at this as a great program. Again, this is a national championship caliber program. There's no reason to shoot for anything different than that. I think they'll end up with a really good coach, and I think this will just be an odd blip. And again, he made a Sweet 16. I'm not saying that it didn't go well for at least 1 year, or I guess the first year went pretty well too. But I think they'll be back on their feet and really good.
Yeah, he had a good 3 seasons there, 3 seasons there, and Buzz Williams obviously being a name there. I like Tony Skinn, Final Four guy at George Mason. He recruited Derek Queen. He's a DMV guy. Outperformed at George Mason. I hope he can be in Maryland.
Look at you. You're already throwing candidates out there. All right, good stuff, Jordan. Thanks a lot. Thanks to you for watching Big Ten Today.